As the 1940s would wind down, we would begin to see ghosts taking a shift back to their roots as scary beings in true terror and horror movies and suspenseful situations. The shift wasn't quick and obvious, but after nearly a decade of comedic gags, any type of recovery was better than none at all. Comedic horror films were now becoming a dying breed, starting with The Ghost of Berkeley Square, a 1947 British comedy film directed by Vernon Sewell. The film is an adaptation of the novel No Nightingales by Carol Bram and S.J. Simmons, inspired by the enduring reputation of the property at 50 Berkeley Square, known as the most haunted house in London. Despite its stellar cast of highly respected character actors and its inventive use of special effects, the film proved to be less successful at the box office than they had hoped for. The following year would introduce Shakespeare's Hamlet to the horror genre and its ghosts, but considering that this is a common story, we won't dive into this one as much, aside from the fact that it took home the Oscar for Best Picture in 1948. The fluctuation between seriousness and comedic fodder was constant, as the two genres would trade places with one another, after featuring ghost films in true horror movies, only to be featured as gags the following year. It was like a roller coaster. None is a better example than these years being covered, since the next year we would get the Three Stooges' next project, The Ghost Talks, the 113th short in a series of comedy shorts produced by the trio. The Stooges are moving men assigned to move furniture out of an old haunted castle. All goes well at first, outside of a few scares, until a clanking suite of armor inhabited by the ghost of a peeping Tom scares the hapless Stooges, until he convinces them that he is in fact a friendly spirit. After finally gaining their trust, Tom tells the trio the story of his watching lady, Godiva, only to get a pie in the face. It turns out his ghost is cursed and trapped inside the suit of armor, having been trapped there for 1,000 years. The roller coaster of shifts would continue with 1951's Scrooge. Again, like with Hamlet, there's not much to cover about here, with such a widely known film that we've covered in the initial part of this series. And finally, we top things off with Scared Stiff, a 1953 American musical comedy film directed by George Marshall and starring Dean Martin and Jerry Lee Lewis, one of the 17 movies made by Martin and Lewis's team. Mary Carroll inherits her family's ancestral home located on a small island off of Cuba, and despite warnings and death threats, decides to sail to Havana to take possession of the haunted castle. She is joined by nightclub entrepreneur Larry Todd, who, believing he has killed a mobster, flees to New York with his friend, Miriam. Once on the island, the three enter the eerie castle, and after viewing the ghost of one of Mary's ancestors and fighting off a menacing zombie, find the key to the castle's treasure. Join us next time as we continue traveling down the road of horror.